Have you ever reacted to something and thought, why did that hit me so hard? Not everything triggers you, but when something does, it bypasses logic. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system responding to a pattern written in your chart. So much like everything else, your natal chart can definitely talk to you and describe your emotional triggers and why certain situations hit you so hard. And in this video, I will be discussing just that. So if you want to know more, stick around. You definitely don't want to miss this. Hello, my loves. As always, I hope that this video finds you well and in excellent spirits. So, welcome to day 15 of our 31-day wellness and astrology series. And today's video starts a week that has everything to do with the mind and emotion. So, to recap, the first week of this series was laying the foundation. The second week was about your physical body. And this week, we're delving into the mind and the emotional body. And today we're talking about emotional triggers and how astrology explains them. So clearly, you don't need just your natal chart to understand your emotional triggers, right? If you were to take some time to really dissect why and when you get triggered, you can figure that out. However, it's like your natal chart gives you the cliff notes to it. It gives you the cheat sheet. It tells you exactly how you're designed and sort of what you're predisposed to be triggered by, okay? Emotional triggers aren't random. They're moments where your past meets your present, your body reacts before your mind, or something touches a sensitive internal pattern. Remember, astrology, amongst other things, astrology is definitely pattern recognition. And your triggers are really indicative of when a particular pattern is being activated. In astrology, triggers show up where mind, emotion, and identity intersect. Now, this isn't about blame. It's more so about understanding why certain situations activate you instantly. And like I love to say, when you know better, you do better. And so when you know exactly how you're predisposed to be triggered, you can react better. So here's the real issue. Most people are told to quote unquote calm down, or don't take it personally, or just let it go. But you can't logic your way out of a nervous system response. When triggers aren't understood, people tend to overreact and then feel ashamed later, shut down emotionally, replay situations for hours or days, or sometimes even longer, internalize blame, and or feel confused by their own reactions. The glory of understanding your triggers via astrology is that it gives you choice. And choice is emotional freedom. You get to choose how you want to feel. You get to choose how to react to a certain situation because you are aware of what triggers you in the first place. So now let's get into some examples to demonstrate this concept. All right, so instead of looking at just one placement, triggers form when patterns collide. Here are some common trigger themes by element. So first, we begin with fire dominant charts. So by fire dominant chart, I mean that you have a lot of planets in fire signs, or your chart ruler, which is the ruler of your first house, is in a fire sign, okay? So you tend to be triggered by feeling ignored, being controlled, and or a lack of momentum. So your reaction to getting triggered is often anger, impulsivity, defensiveness, blowing up unexpectedly. The trigger isn't the situation. Instead, it's more so the threat to autonomy or self-expression. So as someone who is fire dominant, being able to express yourself, being able to be independent is very much a part of your particular design. And when that pattern is threatened, that is how you typically get emotionally triggered. Next, we move on to Earth dominant chart. So this means that you've got a lot of planets in Earth signs, or your chart ruler is in an Earth sign. You tend to be triggered by instability, unpredictability, and criticism. And when you're triggered, your reaction is typically shutting down, overworking, or trying to control the situation. So the trigger for you is fear of losing safety or competence. Resources, stability, that's very much a part of your energy signature as someone who is earth dominant. And when that is threatened or even taken away, that is how you get emotionally triggered. Next, we have air dominant charts. So this means that you have a lot of planets in air signs and or your chart ruler is in an air sign. You tend to be triggered by miscommunication, tension in relationships, and or feeling misunderstood. Now, when triggered, your reaction typically is overthinking, talking it out endlessly, or just detachment altogether. For you, the trigger is loss of mental clarity or harmony. When you don't feel clear about something, you tend to get triggered. When you're misunderstood, when there's lack of communication, even that can be indicative of an emotional trigger for you. Whenever your harmony even is threatened, that can also be an emotional trigger for you. And then finally, we move on to water dominant charts. So this means that you have a lot of planets in water signs and or your chart ruler is in a water sign. So you tend to be triggered by emotional neglect, boundary violations, and or unresolved emotional energy. When triggered, your reaction typically is withdrawal, emotional flooding, or just silence. So the trigger is emotional insecurity or lack of safety for you. If you're not feeling good emotionally, if someone abandons you, if you feel unsafe, if your boundaries are constantly violated, that can trigger your emotional response. So let's briefly talk about what happens when triggers run the show. So when your triggers aren't recognized, they turn into patterns. So these are repeated conflicts, emotional exhaustion, self-abandonment, people-pleasing, and or emotional isolation. You don't just react once, you relive the same emotional loop. So what ends up happening is every trigger, even though it is a separate occurrence, a different situation, you treat it the same because it is a pattern, and that's what keeps you looped in this cycle of being triggered. Triggers aren't meant to control you. They're meant to teach you where care is needed. It's basically the universe's way of showing you what cycle needs to be broken, what emotions need to be addressed so you can break that loop. It's almost like a karmic loop in a sense as well. And like I said, you kind of treat every situation as if it were the same. And that's definitely not the case. And so understanding how and when you are triggered is half the battle, but being willing to recognize it and break that loop is definitely another. So now let's get into today's wellness tip, which is essentially what to do when you're triggered. So here's a simple regulation practice. So step number 1, pause and name what you're feeling without judging it. This is sort of meant to be like a stage of observation. And this can be really difficult because when you're triggered, the last thing that you can think of is pausing and naming it without judgment, right? But this really is the first step in it. So it may take some practice to do this, but it is definitely a worthwhile endeavor. Step number 2, ask, what does this remind me of? So this is sort of getting you to recognize the pattern. Remember I said before, we get into that emotional trigger loop because we treat every situation the same. And so here in step number 2, you're sort of being asked to identify what the pattern is. Step number 3, identify whether the response is emotional, mental, or identity based. It's really important to categorize what kind of response it is so that you know how to respond accordingly. Step number 4, ground the body first. Breath, touch, stillness. Allow yourself to calm down if you can and get present. Get into your body. And then finally, step number 5, Respond only after the intensity softens. Now, this ritual is going to take some practice because oftentimes when we're triggered, we are just flying off the handle, or we're so enraged or sad or whatever it is that we can't even think straight. But if you implement this kind of practice into your daily life, when you get triggered, you'll find that you don't get triggered as often. And I mean this with sincerity, real talk. You find that you don't get triggered as often. But more importantly, this is how you break that emotional loop. This is how you break those patterns so that you're no longer triggered. Like I said, it will take some practice, but it's definitely a worthwhile endeavor. And honestly, I'm not just talking out of my ass here. This is a regulation practice that I regularly practice. Once I understood the purpose of emotional triggers, I became very intentional about breaking that karmic loop and breaking those patterns. And like I said, from experience, this takes practice. And still, I'm a work in progress when it comes to this because there are certain things, and those certain things are definitely evident in my natal chart, that when they are activated, I tend to fly off the handle. But the more that you sort of observe, calm down, and then try to sort of make sense of why you're feeling the way you feel, you definitely won't get triggered as often. And you'll definitely understand the parts of your life that need tweaking, or the parts of your life that, need attention currently. Because anything, emotional triggers, physical pain, it's a signal, it's a sign that something needs attention. And once you give it that attention, you kind of quote unquote fix it, and then you can move on. And that's the best feeling, honestly. I've gotten to a point where certain things, I would want to fight somebody, or I would just get super, in my Virgo energy, super critical and condescending. I don't do those things anymore because I've taken the time to understand what triggers me emotionally. And of course, it's detailed in my natal chart. And if you want to know more about your emotional triggers, or if you find yourself working through something quite difficult right now, then consider taking my signature natal chart experience, which is called the Blueprint. So essentially, it's a natal chart reading and a transit report all in one. So you get a 60-minute live reading, a private online client portal with access to certain resources, and then you get a 30-day alignment map, which is a transit report for 30 days post-reading, so you know exactly what to expect and when to expect it. Now, if you're interested, the first step would be to book a free 15-minute clarity call so we can understand whether the service is even right for you, and if so, how to get started. So if you're interested, the link to that is in the description box below. And if you just want to have a little fun right now, consider taking my self-care signature quiz. It's a fun little quiz that helps you understand your self-care signature archetype. So if you haven't done that already, the link to that is also in the description box below. All right, my loves, that's pretty much all I've got for you for this video on emotional triggers. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.